My name is Mairead Maguire. I'm from the Peace People in Belfast.
And you recently went on a trip to Syria. Can you tell us about your trip and what you saw?
Yes, we went with a delegation of 16 people into both Lebanon and Syria, and we went at the invitation of the Patriarch of Syria to see what was happening on the ground. We were also invited by a movement, a civil liberties grassroots movement called Musalaha. And this movement within Syria are working for peace and reconciliation. They believe that they can solve the problem within Syria through dialogue and through negotiation. And they can do it without outside interference. What we found in Syria, first when we were in the Beirut, in the camp, refugee camp, where thousands and thousands of Syrians had fled from Syria into the refugee camps in Beirut. The people there had nothing. The Lebanese government was doing its best to cope with the refugee influx, but there were far too many. But we asked several people, why did they flee Syria? And I'll just tell you one story. One man told us that he, in his town in Homs, the foreign fighters had come in. They were shooting and killing and they were raping women and burning their homes. And thousands of people fled because they were frightened. Whenever we went in, we heard that story repeated over and over again. Whenever we went into Syria itself, we visited the hospital in Syria. The doctors told us how they were trying to cope with so many people injured. They reckon over 80,000 have been killed and thousands of injuries. The doctor told us that many people had been killed by jihadists and also armed fighters inside, opposition fighters inside. But one man told me the story that he is in his mosque. He was an imam, a holy man in his mosque, because he spoke out against the violence of these foreign fighters. They came, they abducted him, they held and tortured him for several days. They cut off his ear. He showed us his ear was cut, his throat they tried to kill him. They beat him badly and left him for dead. He, by a miracle, recovered. But he said that these are foreign fighters, these are fighters from outside, they're well armed, they're well equipped, they're very vicious. And he said these are not Muslims. He said good Muslims don't do anything like this, they're fundamental extremists. And that's what we learned. Within Syria there are over 40,000 foreign jihadists attached to Al-Qaeda, well tripped, well armed, with plenty of money, and their agenda is not for human rights or democracy within Syria. It is to take over Syria, but they are being funded by Qatar, Saudi Arabia, America and Britain. These people are actually now sending arms to jihadists who are murdering people inside Syria.
I was going to ask you, what's your assessment of Obama's actions compared to what you actually saw happening there? Is it the right thing that he's doing?
No, he's doing completely the wrong thing. They're arming terrorists who are murdering people. And if this continues, then more and more people will flee Syria into the surrounding countries, particularly Christians, because the minority groups are under great threat by these fundamental extremist groups. They will flee into Lebanon and surrounding countries. It will destabilize the entire Middle East and could create a situation that we will never be able to take control of. So there is an alternative, and the alternative is supporting within Syria the like of Musalaha, the non-violent movement, the people who are working towards elections next year, and building up the peace process within Syria, that the religious people and both the Muslims and the Christians are working for peace and reconciliation, and they support that, and no outside intervention in Syrian affairs.
Thank you so much for your input and your experience and sharing that with us. Is there anything else you would like to share or say?
Yes, I would like to say to President Obama, when we were with the Prime Minister in Syria, we met with the Prime Minister and 7 other ministers, and they're getting on with their business, trying to run their government, and they support their president. NATO has produced a report last week that said 70% of the people of Syria support their president because they're scared if they don't support their president, support a democratic process towards elections and solve the problem within Syria. The jihadists, fundamentalists, fighters will go on and their country will be destroyed from within. So has President Obama, would he like it if someone decided to come over to America and take over his country and take over his leadership? I don't think so. So what you apply that rule both ways, but I also want to say, when we were with the Prime Minister, we asked him, did the Syrian government use sarin gas against its people? And he replied, we were in session when we heard that chemical weapons had been used at Aleppo. We immediately sent letters to the UN to ask them to send in people to investigate what had happened, because the Syrian government did not use chemical weapons against our own people. Carla De Ponta from the UN investigating team said that the Syrian government did not use chemical weapons against their own people, but they think that the rebels may have. They're still trying to investigate that. Just last week, the Syrian government and all the religious leaderships invited the UN to come into Syria to tell the truth of what's happening in Syria. A proxy war by outside forces, and the world must stand up against it.